Hello, church. Welcome back to our series, Rise Up. This week, we're moving into kind of the second section of 1 Samuel. So far, Israel has been without a king, and they've only had prophets and judges to lead them. And Samuel has been one of these great leaders of Israel. He's been kind of the mouthpiece for God. He hasn't, sat on a throne or been a traditional ruler the way other nations around Israel had at the time. But God would speak through him, and then he would speak to the people, and the people would know what direction they were supposed to go. But this is kind of a pivot point in Israel's history. This is a turning point where they move from that section into a monarchy. And so in this way, 1 Samuel kind of functions as a transition period. We're moving from judges to kings. And we have this overlap of this prophet Samuel who led Israel in the meantime. And so where we're at in the story, Israel has returned to God. They've gone back to obeying him and trusting him. And Samuel has put them back on the right track. And they've experienced victories over their enemies as a result. But Samuel's getting old. He can't be their leader forever. And the people are watching, seeing how his sons are not following in his example. And again, this is a theme that we've seen over and over already in the book, and we're going to continue to see. That just because a father is one way doesn't mean that the son is going to follow in his footsteps. Just because this lineage was supposed to continue in one direction doesn't mean that it's going to, for better and for worse. And so the people come to Samuel and they say, hey, we want a king. We're tired of doing this cycle of our prophets and our priests leading us astray. We're tired of being different than the other nations. We're tired of not having a person, a tangible person that we can go to when we have problems. We need someone sitting on the throne. You've been great, but you're getting old. Give us a king. Well, this doesn't sit right with Samuel because God is supposed to be their king. They have a leader. They have someone giving them direction. They have someone who is telling them which way to go and winning wars for them and doing all of these things. But it's not good enough for Israel. And so Samuel goes to God and he tells God what the people have said. And God responds by telling them to go ahead and do it. This is verse 7 in chapter 8. And the Lord said to Samuel, obey the voice of the people in all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me from being king over them. God says, look, Samuel, don't take it personally. This isn't about you. This is bigger than you. These are people that have seen this cycle repeat over and over and over again. It's not about you and your kids. It's ultimately about their lack of faith in God. God is hurt by this. He is their king. He's won wars that no human king could ever win for Israel. He's done things that no human king could do. And yet the people would prefer a tangible, physical king. So Samuel tries to warn the people. He says, hey, you don't know what you're asking for. No human king could ever measure up to God. Even your best king is still going to let you down. And we'll see that as we get into the monarchy in a couple chapters. But the people say, no, we still want a king. We still want a king. And Samuel says, you don't understand. A king is going to be selfish. A king is going to be oppressive. A king is going to demand taxes from you. And he's going to, force labor on you. And he's going to do all these things. And you're going to regret it. And the people say, no, we won't. Give us a king. So Samuel says, okay, if you're sure. So listen to the people reject Samuel's advice. This is verse 19. But the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel, and they said, no, but there shall be a king over us, that we also may be like all the nations, and that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles. And when Samuel had heard all the words of the people, he repeated them in the ears of the Lord, and the Lord said to Samuel, obey their voice and make them a king. This is what Israel ultimately doesn't get. They want to be like all the other nations around them. They want a king like everyone else has. They want one guy sitting on the throne that they can see face to face, that they know to tell them what to do, to judge them, to go out to battle for them. But they were never meant to be like all the other nations. They were never meant to fit in with the rest of the world. They were meant to be holy. They were meant to be set apart. Other nations were supposed to look at Israel and see that there was something different on a fundamental level, on a government level, on a basis of leadership even. They were supposed to be different. People were supposed to look at them and go, it doesn't make sense that they're winning these wars, that they have this political unity, that they're guided as a nation, when they don't even have a king sitting on the throne, because the point was they were supposed to look at Israel's deeds and realize that they did have a king sitting on a heavenly throne. Israel was supposed to use their lifestyle to evangelize and testify to the nations around them, but instead they were so desperate to fit in. And I think this is something that is so important and applicable for us as Christians today. We are so desperate to fit in with the rest of the world. When things aren't going our way, when things look tough, when we can't understand how things are going to work out, it's so easy for us to look at people around us and say, man, why can't I just have a normal life like them? God, why do you have to test me in this way? Why do I have to walk this path? Why can't I just be like them? And the truth is, you were never meant to be like the nations around you. You were never meant to be like the people around you. You were meant to stand out. You were meant to live your life in a way that doesn't make sense, so that when people look at it and go, how are you doing this? You have no other explanation but to say, God is my king. He's the one judging me. He's the one guiding me. He's the one fighting my battles. If Israel had an earthly king and they win the war, the praise goes to the king. And we'll see that happen repeatedly throughout the rest of Israel's history. But when they have no king and they still win a war, the glory can only go to God. When life makes sense, when there's a tangible, physical, easily accessible answer for our success, for our happiness, for our fulfillment, for our comfort, for all of those things, the thing is what gets the glory in the end. But when there is no explanation, when it doesn't make sense, that's when God gets the glory, because there is no other explanation. We already have a king. Stop trying to be like the nations around you.